elevators where nobody could imagine 100 years ago that elevators could run without a lift boy. Yeah. But the real serious question here is a system where both is allowed, human driving and automated driving. Isn't that creating even more conflicts than a system where you have only self-driving cars?
There are big potential problems there, but again, the starting point of the discussion should be to realize that today, every year, 1.25 million people are killed in traffic accidents every year. That's twice the number of people that die from war, crime, and terrorism put together. And so to switch to self-driving vehicles, we will never reach perfect. We just need to be better than humans. And if the switch to self-driving vehicles means that the number of people being killed in traffic accidents go down to 500,000 a year, we saved 700,000 lives every year. So it's not going to be perfect, but there is a lot to be said for switching to self-driving vehicles.
You said that you don't want to become a politician or that you have no party political profile. Nevertheless, I have to ask you a political question or raise a political topic, because you know that the most heated topic these days in Germany, and I think in the rest of Europe, is the issue of migration.
Yeah.
And you wrote an impressive chapter on that book with a kind of clarity and coolness that nobody would dare to write about here in Germany. And then basically reduced it to three rules, the rules of successful migration, and I translated them myself, so perhaps inappropriately, but I just read it. First, the host country is hosting immigrants. Full stop, that's a fact. Second, in return, immigrants have to respect norms and values of the host country, even if it means to give up some of their traditional norms and values. Third, if migrants integrate appropriately, they become equal members of the host country, they become us. So, do you think that these three rules could be implemented in Germany and could solve the heated debate and could calm down political radicalization and strengthened left and right-wing parties? Or does it remain a kind of punchline of a future-oriented historian?
No, I don't. Theoretically, you can do anything. I mean, there is all identities that exist today in the world were formed through a historical process in which people from different backgrounds were amalgamated into a new identity. 1,000 years ago, even 200 years ago, there were no Germans in the sense that we have today. You had Bavarians and Saxons and Prussians and so forth, and quite often the animosity and hatred and violence, let's say between Catholics and Protestants, if you think about the 30 Years' War, was far, far worse than almost anything we see today. And the descendants of the people who butchered each other by the millions, now they don't care, you're a Catholic, you're a Protestant, you're a Bavarian, you're a Prussian, maybe there are a few jokes about it, but it's no longer a major issue, I think, in German politics, certainly not like in 1618. So you can integrate people. There is people often think about it in biological terms, like as if different human groups are like different animal species, and this is absolute nonsense. You cannot integrate chimpanzees and gorillas to form a single species. Just, biology doesn't allow it. Gorillas and chimpanzees cannot have children together. But with humans, it's possible. On the other side of the coin, I think it should be very clear, again, from a historical perspective, that if the majority of the local population is against immigration, it is usually a huge mistake on the part of the government to try to force large-scale immigration, because it just wouldn't work. You need the cooperation of the population in order for immigration to work. So if people refuse, even if you think they're making an ethical mistake, that they should agree, still this is democracy, I'll say something different. I think maybe the worst thing about the immigration debate now in Germany and in Europe as a whole is that people are turning it into a kind of Manichaean struggle between good and evil, as if anybody who opposes immigration is a racist Nazi, and anybody who is in favor of immigration is a lunatic or traitor. And I think that in the end, this is a debate between two legitimate views, which should be decided through the normal democratic process. This is what you have democracy for.
But in Germany, there are additional sensitivities driven by the historic guilt and trauma that the Third Reich and the Holocaust created. So, in a way, it is understandable that Germany is handling these things with a higher degree of emotions.
Yeah, it's understandable, but
it's wrong.
But it's not necessarily constructive.
Yeah. Israel integrated a couple of million Russians very successfully, but the big difference was that they all shared, first of all, the desire to become a member of the Israeli society and all its values, and a large part of that even shared this, the most widespread religion in Israel. So to which degree does cultural tradition and religion define certain limits for integration?
Yeah, it defines a lot of limits. Now in Israel also immigration, it's a country of immigrants. I mean, almost everybody or his or her parents immigrated from someplace. It's really, if you look for an example in history of immigrants violently conquering a country to which they immigrated, like, you know, all these mad scenarios, I think, that people have around here, of Muslim immigrants taking over Germany or the Europe and turning them into a caliphate. So an example you can see is Israel, in which immigrants forcefully took over the country into which they immigrated. And the whole ethos of the country is built around that. And the Russian Jews were accepted with open arms, generally, because Israel is in a struggle for survival, and they were seen in the end as more soldiers. Not necessarily literal soldiers, also literal soldiers in the army, but also more broadly, soldiers in the struggle for the survival of Israel. Now you have immigration coming from non-Jews, say from Africa, and the reaction of the Israeli population is completely different.
Yeah. So the third point, if immigrants integrate appropriately, they become equal members of the host country, they become us. But if not, what should be done, and what is successful integration? So how do you measure successful integration? What are the criteria, and what happens if these criteria are not met?
Well, the whole chapter is really about that. One of the key points is the difference in timetables, in time scale. Different people judge the success or failure of immigration on a different time scale. And I think a lot of the misunderstanding is about that. If I'm a second-generation immigrant, and I was born here, my parents came from Syria or Turkey or somewhere, but I was born here. If I'm not fully integrated into German society, is this failure or not? On the time scale of my own personal life, if people tell me, you're not German, go back to Turkey, for my life, I was born here. Maybe I don't even speak Turkish. I never visited Turkey. All my friends are here. All my life I was here. So when people tell me go back to Turkey, I was never there. What do you want from me? I'm German. But from a broad historical perspective, 30 years is an extremely short time for a culture to fully absorb people from a different country, from a different religion, from a different culture. So you have this really difficult issue of what is the time scale we are thinking about. And similarly, there is this issue of accounting, of how do you count violations? Let's say you have 1 million immigrants, and out of these 1 million immigrants, 100 join terrorist organizations and commit attacks against the host country. Is this success or failure? You have 100 violators and 999,000 something people who didn't. So how do you count that? And the opposite is also true. If you walk down the street 1,000 times and you are not molested, nobody shouts any racial abuse, nothing. And then one time, somebody shouts a racial abuse. So is the conclusion is that the Germans accept me or reject me? How do you count? What is the accounting measurement? We don't, and what you see in most of the debates about immigration is that just the two sides of the debate, they are using a different timescale, they are using a different measure of accounting. So referring back to what you said earlier in your speech about the facts and the importance of facts. So yes, we have a fact that an immigrant joined a terrorist organization. But what does it mean? Is it a violation of the immigration deal on the whole or not? If you can't agree on the accounting method and the timescale, then two sides looking at exactly the same fact will reach completely different conclusions.
We learned that the three rules that you have defined are not solving all problems immediately, but it's a good start. So we have to come to an end, and just one concluding question. Looking forward, let's say for the next 100 years ahead, what are, from your perspective today, what is the biggest threat and what is the biggest opportunity for our society?
So the biggest threat is the three big problems I mentioned in the beginning, nuclear war, climate change, and technological disruption. And of the three, technological disruption is the most complicated to deal with because we don't know what to do with it. With nuclear war and climate change, it's very easy. At least we know what we need to do, stop them, prevent them. But with the rise of AI and biotechnology, there are immense beneficial opportunities. And we are not going to stop research in AI and biotech. So the best case scenario is that we will have much better healthcare, we will have much more leisure time, we will have the ability to explore ourselves and develop ourselves as humans in ways which were never possible before in history. The flip side, the worst case scenario, is that we might have digital dictatorships in which all power is concentrated in the hands of a tiny elite that monitors everybody all the time, that really humanity might split into a caste of superhumans and an underclass of useless people, people who have no economic value and no political power, and it's the same technologies. I think one of the big lessons of the 20th century and of the Industrial Revolution, and again, of this industrial plant we are now having the conference in, which began its life as an electricity plant, is that technology is not deterministic. The same electricity served the Third Reich and communist East Germany and liberal democratic United Germany. So the electricity doesn't care what you do with it. And you can do with it many different things. And it's the same with AI and biotech. We can use them to build paradise or hell. It's really up to us.
Do you believe in singularity, that one day machines will take over human intelligence?
Human intelligence, yes. Human consciousness, I'm far less certain about that.
Okay, that's reassuring. Thank you very much. It was great talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you.